Magandang umaga. I'm Trixie Cruz-Angeles and this is Luminous on Facebook. Marami po kasing mga tanong sa Articulate. Marami po kasing nagtatanong tungkol dito sa Anti-Terrorism Act. We're going to do another live on the implementing rules and regulations later, ha. Pero this is a persistent question kasi, and it's easier to answer by live. At the same time, makikita ko yung mga tanong ninyo at masasagot natin kaagad. So, anti-terrorism law. Dito sa anti-terrorism law, ayon sa section 4, no? Ay, magandang umaga. Ayon dito sa section 4, ito yung acts, terrorist acts, okay? Terrorism. Terrorism is committed by any person who within or outside the Philippines, regardless of the stage of execution, engages in acts intended to cause death or serious bodily injury to any person or endangers a person's life. Engages in acts intended to cause extensive, take note of the term, extensive damage or destruction to a government or public facility, public place, or private property. Engages in acts intended to cause extensive interference with, damage, or destruction to critical infrastructure. Develops, manufactures, possesses, acquires, transports, supplies, or uses weapons, explosives, or biological, nuclear, radiological, or chemical weapons. And release of dangerous substances or causing fire, floods, and explosions. Okay. When the purpose of such act, by its nature and content, is to intimidate the general public or a segment of it, create an atmosphere or spread a message of fear, to provoke or influence by intimidation the government or any international organization, or seriously disturb or destroy the fundamental political, economic, and social structures of the country, or create a public emergency, or seriously, take note of the terms, seriously undermine public safety, shall be guilty of terrorism. Okay. Provided that terrorism, as defined in this section, shall not include advocacy, protest, dissent, stoppage of work, industrial or mass action, and other similar exercises of civil and political rights which are not intended to cause death or serious physical harm to a person, to endanger a person's life, or to create a serious risk of public safety. Bong, pwedeng hinaan? Give me 2 seconds. Bong? Bong? Pwedeng hinaan? Naririnig siya. Thank you. Alright. Thank you. There you go. Nadi-distract kayo. This house is always full of it kasi. So, okay. Terrorism. Back to terrorism. Let's just explain section 4, no? And why it is important that we take every single word into consideration. Pansin nyo dun sa terrorism is committed by any person who within or outside the Philippines, regardless of the stage of execution. Okay? What does it mean? Yung person, pwedeng dito gagawin yung krimen, o nandito siya, committed by any person nandito siya, o nasa labas ng bansa, when the crime is committed. Okay? They can commit it from abroad. You can commit, for instance, a crime while you are abroad. You can commit terrorism while you are abroad, even if you're not within the jurisdiction of the Philippines. Now, there are 2 instances when that can happen. Unang-una, nasa labas kayo ng Pilipinas, but you set things in motion para dito mangyari yung krimen. Okay? Meron ding instances na pag kinilala natin yung terrorist organization at ang kinumit nila na crimes are outside the Philippines because terrorism is a crime against humanity, that's also possible, madadamay yung tao na yon, yung mga tao na yon na kinikilala natin, membro ng isang terrorist organization at they committed an act of terrorism. Okay? Regardless of stage of execution, anong ibig sabihin nito? Ibig sabihin kahit nagpaplano pa lang, kahit nasa hindi pa nako-commit, 'di ba? O kaya you've set things into motion pero hindi pa sumasabog yung tinanim, then that is already an act of terrorism. So, importante yung mga words na yun, within or outside the Philippines, at saka regardless of the stage of execution. So, remember pati dito sa batas na to, pinapunish na kahit pinaplano pa lang. Kahit proposal to commit pa lang, an act of terrorism, yung mga tipong nag-uusap kayo, tara, pasabugin natin yung ganyan. That's quite possible that you can be charged with proposal to commit terrorism. Okay? So, regardless of the stage of execution, pinaplano pa lang, nagawa nyo na, or immediately thereafter, or papunta pa lang kayo, that is already considered the commission of an act of terrorism. Okay. Ang pinakamahalaga, yung sinasabi natin dito na engaged in acts intended to cause extensive damage. Extensive hindi pwedeng maliit na damage lang. Or destruction. So, extensive damage or destruction, sinira. To a government or public facility, public place, or private property. Okay? Ulit. Engages in acts that cause extensive damage or destruction, ibig sabihin na sira, to critical infrastructure. Magkakaroon ng konting issue dito kasi ang tanong is, extensive damage and extensive destruction ba to? Or extensive lang in damage, pero destruction kahit konti lang in destruction. Kasi, kung i-take into consideration, pwede rin kasing any stage of the commission. Diba? Okay. So, bakit ako nag-zero in dito sa extensive damage? Kasi, maraming nagtatanong kung kasama yung pagsusulat doon sa mga gusali. Yung mga nagsusulat na NPA, yung mga tipong administrasyon, ibagsak, Amerikano, tuta ng kano, yung mga ganyan. Tapos, whoever is the president, tuta ni ganito, or sinusulat yan parate. Sinusulat, parate, hindi naman parate. Sinusulat kasi minsan yan kapag, di ba may rally, makikita mo yung ibang mga tao, nagpipintura na sa walls, ibagsak, yung mga ganyan. Ngayon, is that already considered an act of terrorism? Hindi po, hindi po. Kasi, ang nakalagay dun sa ating batas, engages in acts intended to cause extensive damage. So, extensive damage ba yun yung, pininturahan nila yung mga walls? Hindi po. Pero, that would be punishable under Article 327 of the Revised Penal Code. So, any person who deliberately causes the property of another any damage, which doesn't fall under the special cases of malicious mischief, then that would be considered malicious mischief. Paano yan pinapunish? Depende sa value ng damage. Pagka more than 1,000 pesos, prison correctional. Arresto mayor kapag 200 pesos lang. Ganon. So, may gradations ng penalties. So, hindi po natin, bakit natin sinasabi na yung ordinary na malicious mischief, yung pagpipintura sa mga gusali, ganon, kino-consider natin na hindi bahagi ng anti-terrorism law. Kasi po, for everything else, for whatever it is that we limit dahil gumagawa tayo ng batas, what we do is we also apply reason. So kapag meron tayong kino-consider is something punishable by law, we look at the law, we look at the jurisprudence, how the Supreme Court has interpreted itong mga how the Supreme Court has interpreted other provisions of law na similar, then we also apply reason and logic. Okay? Bakit? Well, in all things, when you execute or interpret the law, when the judiciary interprets the law, kailangan reasonable. So bakit? Ang crime of terrorism is supposed to be addressing yung mga extensive yung damage, yung mga nakakapatay, nakakakos ng widespread fear, nag-i-intimidate ng gobyerno, yung mga ganon. So, what do we do? What do we do about these things? We put in an anti-terrorism law, but you don't include things that can be, that are acts that are, one, punishable by a lesser penalty, especially if you cannot prove intent. Okay. Kasi, di ba, sinasabi natin na bahagi ng batas is yung intention. So, kung nagsusulat ka sa gusali, pero ang hindi ka naman nag-i-intend to intimidate the general public, create an atmosphere of, or spread message of fear and all of that, provoke or intimidate the government, kailangan ganon. Kailangan may intention na ganon. Or, the act itself tends to do that. O sige, let's say na may intention ka manakot, pero the act doesn't really intend to do that, then the court might apply, will most likely apply the reasonableness test. Ibig sabihin, reasonable ba to? If, let's say that he's 18 or 19 years old, na-recruit sa aktivistang organisasyon, sumali sa rally, dahil sa, he got caught up in the situation, o ibagsak, sulat-sulat siya ngayon. Pentel pen gamit, o kaya pintura, may pintura yung mga kasama ko, sulat-sulat siya sa pader. Did he intend to cause the extensive damage? No. Did he intend to cause widespread fear? No, he was expressing his indignation. Did he intend to provoke the government? No. Was this act intended to do that? Quite possibly no. And when in doubt, the law always is interpreted in favor of the accused. Naintindihan ko maraming galit. Okay? Let's start with that. Maraming galit kasi nga naman, kadalasan yung mga rallyista, they cause a lot of inconvenience. Di ba? Bakit? And then, nagrarally, nagta-traffic, nabubwisit tayo, we don't agree kung ano yung sa pinaglalaban nila, then, naiinis tayo. Yes. And many of us, we want the law to address yung galit natin rather than to address yung actual damage or to address yung acts ng mga tao na gusto nating i-correct. Okay? So, iintindihin natin two things. Number one, intindihan natin yung galit natin and why we want this. And two, everything must be within reason. Okay? Okay. So let's, nakikita ko ang gaganda ng mga tanong ninyo. So let's go now to your questions para madali. Para maano tayo, mabilis tayo. So yung mga hindi ko pa nababasa, please repeat your question na lang para makita ko. Okay? Shucks, ang bilis. Sorry, hindi ko mapigil. Ulit Palitin natin. Yan. Ito, sabi ni Ian Marvin Abelia, hindi po ba mahirap hulihin yung first part, yung stage na pinaplano pa lang? Ano po kaya ang para-paraan para sa planning pa lang ay huli na? Remember yung wiretapping? Di ba meron ditong portion where you can get an arrest warrant for a wiretap? Tapos you can record those conversations. Those conversations can now be used as evidence against those people. So, planning stage pwede. Ano pa? Sandali, bilis eh. Sabi ni Bong Colyado, bakit ang penalty sa pag-vandalize ay masyadong mababa? Tapos yung pag-repair naman ng gobyerno ay gumagastos more than the penalty cost. Parang mali naman yata. Dapat siguro taasan ng penalty charge. Ako, I agree with that, na taasan yung penalty to include a fine that will address the damage done. Okay? So, yes, I agree with you. Medyo mababa yung penalty. Tandaan po natin, the law, the Revised Penal Code was created in 1930. So, pati yung mga, kaya nga, very recently, in fact, about 2 years ago, binago yung ilang provisions ng batas to increase the penalty of fine. Pero hindi nila in-increase yung penalty ng imprisonment. So, we'll take that into, pero itong portion ng malicious mischief, hindi po yata nabago. Sabi ni Rene Braga Baingco, Yung nanay ni Baby River, nahulihan ng explosives. Terrorist act na ba po yun? Not if you cannot prove any intent. So, kailangan patunayan yung intent. Kasi pwedeng ngayon, she's being charged with illegal possession lang po. So, ibig sabihin, dun yung sa fiscal mismo, hindi nila mapatunayan yung intent. Intent to cause extensive damage, intent to cause this, intent to cause intimidation, fear, yung mga ganon. So, without the evidence of that, then i-charge lang siya for illegal possession. Pag nakakita sila ng additional evidence, they can ask the court to amend the information, yung charge po sa kanya. Sabi ni Sofia Banada, yung money trails po ng terrorist, sana mahuli po. Opo, kasi may provisions dito sa terrorism, anti-terrorism act, na maaari na rin gamitin ng i-inspect ng Anti-Money Laundering Council yung ibang mga bank accounts if there is a suspicion of terrorism. Sabi ni Manuel Ian Bermoy, what if sila mismo namumuno at sila din papatupad ng ganyang law at saka in the same way they are corrupt kasi maraming ganyang bansa, complete ang law pero ang namumuno ay lawbreaker. Ang dami niyong baka. Okay? First of all, we don't rely on baka in the law. It's always whatever you can prove. Okay? If you cannot prove the corruption, then you cannot accuse of corruption. So, like I said, everything has to also be under the aegis of reason. Ibig sabihin, pag in-apply yung batas, pati pag nang akusa, kapag may hinihinala tayo pero wala tayong ebidensya, accusing people would be libel, di ba? So, ganito kasi yan how do we address this? Pagka nagsa-social commentary tayo, nagpo-political commentary tayo, kadalasan, yung ibang mga komentarista gusto hinihikayat yung galit natin. And sometimes yung galit natin nanghihikayat kahit hindi buo yung reasoning for that. So, people, you know why? Pagka galit tayo kasi, the logic isn't applied very well. It's simple psychology. When you're angry, clarity of thought diminishes. So, some of the commentarists, they really want to make us very, very angry. Pansinin nyo lang, itong buong, what we call political theater, yung buong drama that surrounds certain issues. Hindi natin binabawasan yung paghinanakit at dalamhati ni Reyna May Nasino, pero yung for lack of a better term, yung ginagamit ng mga journalists na term na salsal, yung masyadong sinistir up yung issue about a certain thing to the point na it is over-dramatized, para na siyang political theater, and that is intended to make people angry and less logical. But if they were logical thinkers, then makikita natin that the reason Reyna May was not roomed in with her child is because there is no law that requires that. Right? So why am I saying this? What I'm saying is that sometimes when we ask for certain remedies, we are not satisfied, in part dahil galit tayo. But in the end, the law will always prevail and reason together with the law. The law must be reasonable. So yung pag sinasabi natin, corrupt yan, paano kung ganyan, and therefore the law does not work. What is the remedy for that? The remedy is to address the corruption, but to also address it through the legal system. Okay? Kasi pag sinabi sa atin, that's not going to work. Kasi if somebody tells you, hindi yan mag-work. Hindi yan mag-work kasi corrupt yung mga tao, masama yung mga pulis, corrupt yung mga abogado, yung mga judge, yung mga buong sistema corrupt. You know what they're intending to do? They're intending for you to be disheartened and to lose confidence in the state, to lose confidence in the ability of government to address the issues of justice. And once you lose faith in government, then it is very easy to recruit you into a terrorist or a rebellious organization. That's how recruitment begins. First, by saying that the state fails, by making people lose interest in the state, making people lose interest in using legal means to address their issues, they will now bring you into what we call the dark side. Diba? So catch yourself every time when you say, ang sama-sama na ayoko na sa earth. Hindi umalis ka. Ayoko na sa Pilipinas kasi corrupt ang administrasyon, corrupt ang ganito, na grabe naman yung mga pulis, grabe na yung krimen, grabe na yung ganito. How does that make you feel? Examine your feelings. If your feelings are now at the point na sinasabi mo, walang pag-asa dito, hindi na ako naniniwala sa gobyerno, you're exactly where they want you to be. Diba? And that's why we keep educating people. Ito po yung sistema. Ito yung paraan para ma-address natin. And yung ibang paraan na yun ay kailangan natin ng batas. Sa ibang paraan naman, kailangan natin ng maayos na batas kasi posibleng meron. O kaya, kailangan natin, kulang yung batas. Or even worse, meron tayong batas pero hindi natin ini-implement. Diba? So, yun yung mga remedyo. Yun ang mga i-agitate natin. Implement the law, make a law, create a policy, do this. There is a remedy within the legal system. In fact, even the legal system allows for activism. It's called the right to petition for redress of grievances. So, kung meron tayong hinanakit sa gobyerno, the reason that's why we're saying hindi masama mag-rally, hindi masama magsalita. But, magsalita is one thing, but when you're campaigning for the people to lose confidence in their government, be on guard for this kind of statements. We don't have to believe everything we hear, see, or read. Diba? Okay. Paano yung mga vandalism na revolusyon, ibagsak ang rehimen, sumapi sa CCP, NPA, NDF, di ba yun pasok sa inciting to rebellion? Usually, yan, sinisigaw nila at pinipita sa mga government properties. I agree with you on that. That's inciting to rebellion. So, pwede namang higher yung penalty. But, again, the judge might apply the standard of reason and say, may nahikayat ba? Did this actually put people in danger of joining the revolution because of some painted message on the wall? Diba? So, in all likelihood, kasi if I was the judge, I would apply the lesser penalty, particularly kung bata yan. Tinatanong ni Ma'am Tanasas kung kamusta na po ako. Do I look sick? I'm fine. It's a weekend. So, parang super relaxed. Chill lang. Sabi ni Ma'am Gian, Uy, Ma'am Gian, thank you very much. Hindi na po kayo naka-all caps. Maraming salamat po. Sabi niya, yung kay Soberano, naulaga siya sa dami ng mga comments. Sabi nga ni Attorney Awesome, moron. Naghihikayat pala yon sa Gabriela Youth na mag-join yung mga kabataan. Yun yung problema dyan, paghihikayat gamit yung popularidad niya. Well, that is true. Hindi naman po aksidente na ginagamit ng Gabriela si Lisa Soberano, gawa nga ng very famous siya. At saka kilala siya. So malaki yung possibility na makapaghikayat siya ng maraming tao to join. Diba? Lalo ng kabataan, yung mga mahihilig manood pa ng TV, papanood siya, they think na, uy, okay itong si Lisa Soberano, sige, join ako. Bakit? Si Lisa Soberano ba sumali? Yun yung tanong, di ba? Sabi ni Ma'am Flor Delis, anong kasalanan ng gobyerno, partikular ang Pangulo, sa nangyayari sa buhay niya? Hindi ba kadagahan niya yan nangyari sa buhay niya? I think you're talking about Reyna May Nasino. Blame herself for her misery, why blame others, tapos dadaanin sa drama para makuha ang simpatiya at mag-alsa sa gobyerno. Okay, we have to separate the two things. Si Ma'am Reyna May ay isang ina, at yung pagdadalamhati niya bilang isang ina, hindi natin papakialaman yan. Pero tama kayo, lalong-lalo na dun sa kanyang mga kasamahan na ginagamit itong issue na ito para maghikayat na lumaban sa gobyerno, mawala ng kumpiyansa sa gobyerno, o i-intimidate din ang government authorities na ibigay yung gusto nila. So, in this case, tama po kayo, yung and nagugustuhan ko nga po na yung mga komento ay dahan-dahang umaayos. Walang nagko-condemn dun sa kanyang mourning period, sa kanyang grieving, sa kanyang anak. And in fact, I'm seeing more messages na nakikiramay tayo. We understand her pain as a mother losing a child. Pero the use of this death as theater, 'di ba? As dramatize and continually charging with emotion yung situation is something also for us that we can comment on. Fair comment po yan. Sabi ni Ronald Pasha Almenval, is an audio recording of a planned attack against the government to cause economic sabotage be a ground to apply this law? Yes, of course. But the audio recording must have been recorded in accordance with the amendment to the wiretapping law. It has to be in accordance with the rules of the Anti-Terrorism Act. Kapag nag-audio recording ka tapos unauthorized yan, you did not get the permission of the persons who are talking on the tape or the recording, or you did not get a court warrant, then that is not admissible as evidence. Okay. Mere possession of an illegally taped conversation is actually punishable under the Wiretapping Act. So guys, be careful when you do that. Sabi ni June Cesar, kailan ulit talakayan ng bill for the death penalty? Sana isama na sa criteria ang mga terrorists for death penalty. Aha. I'm not sure. Not sure kung kailan. May nakita akong message. Pakisabi hi kay Attorney Tom Berenguer. Okay. Ngayon, ang tinatanong is, kailan ma-discuss uling death penalty? Hindi ko po alam kasi nasa kalendaryo po dapat ng Kongreso yan. Kaya lang, hindi pa po natin nakikita yung calendar for that one. Bakit po kaya wala pa din ginagawang aksyon ng gobyerno? Sabi ni Carpintero. Talaga naman ang pangalan mo tol na tol. Kahit madaming, wala pa din ginagawang aksyon ng gobyerno laban sa mga anak bayan, kahit maraming evidence at witnesses na terrorist or NPA front sila talaga. Are you sure about na maraming witnesses at maraming evidence? Because if there were, I don't think the PNP would hesitate or the AFP would hesitate in filing the appropriate charges. Okay? So, ulitin ko po don't assume evidence, don't assume witnesses, at papaalala ko din po yung alam naman natin, that phrase, alam naman natin, is not evidence that will stand up in court. Okay? Yung mga halata naman na sumusuporta sila, that's also not evidence that will stand up in court. Okay? Ngayon, dami nagtatanong, kasama ba dyan sa destruction of property yung panununog ng NPA ng mga heavy equipment, yung pagsusunog ng cell towers? Yes po, kasama po yan. Yes. I would say yes, kasama yan. Kasi it's extensive damage to critical infrastructure, that's telecommunications, or cause extensive damage to private property. Okay? Dahil imbued with public interest ang ating communications, yes po, kasama lalo na yung pagsusunog ng towers, yung pagsusunog ng equipment, lalo na yung equipment ng DPWH, opo. O sabi ni, hindi ko maintindihan yung Arabic letters. Pag nang huli ang mga pulis, i-record nila para may ebidensya. Lahat po yan, nire-record. Huwag nyo naman pong i-assume na hindi ginagawa ng pulis yan. Okay. Sabi ni John Cañete, yung pagsusunog ng kilay, hindi. Ako ba pinaparinggan mo, John, Loka lang. Pagsusunog ng kilay, kung nag-aaral ba naman ng estudyante o kaya even the adult, walang masama sa pagsusunog ng kilay. Extortion, sabi ni Ma'am Emily Cruz, kiba nakasama din. Hindi. Extortion has its own penalty. Pero if in furtherance of rebellion, and then mas mataas po yung, it might be higher penalty. Pero extortion itself is under grave coercion, so mataas-taas na rin ang penalty nun. Extortion yung ginagawa ng NPA kasama. You mean extortion by the NPA? Opo, kasi diba, to coerce or cause, intimidate the government or even private persons. Basta, ang intention is terrorism. Yan. Hi, Ma'am Roy! Sabi ni Kim Park, how about vandalism ng government property? Terrorist act din po ba yun? Expenses ng mamamayan yan. It depends po on what the intention is. At saka, what it can tend to do. So, anong government property? Sinunog mo government building, yes. There's a tendency to cause fear. What other government property? Ganito. Di ba government property ng MMDA, yung mga barriers dyan sa EDSA. Kung binangga yan, is that a terrorist act? No, of course not. Again, it will depend on intention. And clearly what it tended to do. Okay. Tinatanong ni John Nico Pineda, totoo po ba yung report doon isang international radio na target daw po ng mga CPP, NPA, yung mga projects ng build. Narinig ko lang po na dinidiscuss doon sa programa ni Nakametong. Well, yes, that's entirely possible because ano yung sinasabi natin, di ba? Para makapaghikayat silang sumama tayo doon sa kanilang communist revolution, kailangan wala tayong tiwala sa ating gobyerno. So how do you lose faith? Pag hindi nagde-deliver ng basic services. At isa sa mga basic services, yung dinideliver ng build. Ang sabi nga ng mga dalubhasa nating mga political analysts at saka even by government appraisal itself, 30 years tayo behind in our national infrastructure. What the President is doing with the flagship projects at saka itong build is simply catching up to the rest of the world. Behind tayo. So why? In part, hindi tayo nakaka-catch up noon because of corruption, and the other is because yung ganyan, mga blockages to our development, and one of the biggest roadblocks to our development is this, an insurgency that will not allow us to develop. Okay? Sabi ni... Sorry. Because we still have to manage the household and everything is going on. So, sabi ni Ma'am Ying, what was the reason of the officers why an hour early ang pag-alis kaya nagkagulo? Di po kaya because the officers felt uncomfortable or probably sensed something kaya they decided to pull out early? Alam nyo, that's entirely possible. Kaya lang, they would have had to explain that to the court. You're right about that one. That's a defense that the officers could have. I agree with you on that one. Might be security reasons, might be sinasabi ng pulis masyadong maraming tao at hindi na nila makokontrol yung sitwasyon. So they would just have to report that to the court. Wala pa naman akong nakikita ng pagre-report dun sa court. Tinatanong ni Noor Vetil, what about vandalism ng government property? Well, we already answered that. It depends on the intent and the tendency of that act to do something. Basta it's in accordance with the Anti-Terrorism Act. Pagsunog ng effigy, hindi man po yata. Isang high government official. Well, I would consider that libelous. Diba? Suspicion. Diba? Yung effigy tsaka pagsusunog nito, it's a dramatization. What's that? That's expression. That's speech. And therefore might be part, that can be punishable as libel, pero not as terrorism. Again, I will say that the courts will have to apply the law with reason, tempered by reason. Sabi ni Ma'am Annie, dito sa 1997 dito sa Hong Kong, Chuan ay Hong Kong line at KCR lang ang Hong Kong. Now, halos lahat ng sulok may train na. Ang Pinas, nabawasan pa. Buti na lang may pidots na dumating. Totoo po yan. For the longest time, kudos kay PNR Chair, GM, June Magno. Kasi, but it's not just June, It was people like Speaker Alvarez and later Speaker Gloria and then the President and all that who all agreed that we need our trains. Sabi ni John Roque, ang isang grupo pwedeng ipa-declare ng Anti-Terrorism Council na as a terrorist organization. Yes po, pwede. Not by the Anti-Terrorism Council. Sila lang po yung magde-determine ng probable cause, tapos dadalhin yan sa Court of Appeals. Yung court po yung magde-declare. Sabi ni Bong Collado, ano naman po yung kaso sa mga nag-upload ng mga videos sa social media about encounter between ASJ and AFP? Lately kasi daming nagva-viral na video tungkol sa pag-atake ng mga Abu Sayyaf, pero I'm not sure kung sila ba yon dahil may isang Philippine Army na captured nila at kinuna ng video habang pinupugutan ng kawawang sundalo nakakagalit. That might be old. Pero yes, sometimes yung pag-e-air ng mga ganong klaseng videos ay threatening yan. So yes, some kinds of speech can be punishable. So nandyan din po yan sa Anti-Terrorism Act. If the intent is to cause widespread fear, yeah, yes. So ulitin ko po hindi po Anti-Terrorism Council ang nagde-declare ng terrorist organization. It's the courts, through the Court of Appeals. Tinatanong ni Abul Kayer Maruhom, why is it now that the newly... Ito, dito na lang, mas malinaw dito. The new chief, Gapay, is focusing on madrasa school as terrorist institutions. He must have research about this. That is why most Muslims are reacting loudly about his statements. Is he? Hindi ko pa po nababasa. I don't think I am qualified to answer kung may ebidensya ba siya. Mahalaga po kasi dito is may ebidensya dapat even to institute these things. So, pero kung ang purpose niya is merely to investigate and to lay to rest certain people's fears, then I don't see why this is going to be an issue. At the same time, I don't think he should be concentrating just on the madrasas, but also on universities and state universities and private universities where recruitment happens. Diba? So, hindi pwede naman na nagko-concentrate kasi dun sa isang school because of the religion. Then that would be grossly violent of human rights. Yeah. Tinanong ni John Cañete, hoy, nag-like and share na ba kayo? Thank you! You're right to bring up the issue of Chief Gapay looking into madrasa schools if no other schools are being looked into. Sabi ni Edgardo Toledo, yung pong mga NPA na nag-raid ng police station na nakapatay, nakasugat ng mga kapulisan, opo, terrorism din po yun. Yeah, kasi yung mga pumatay, yung mga nanakit and all that, and yung but this is also an act of rebellion. So, let's see, that could be 2 crimes. Ito talaga si Ma'am Annie, sumagot pa kay John. Sabi tingnan ko, ano pa yung mga ibang mga tanong. May nagpapa-comment tungkol dun sa sa Twitter, sa tinweet ni ni Sunny Boy Trillanes at saka ni Ma'am Laila de Lima. Hindi ko pa po nakikita Okay. Yung paninira sa isang government official sa Teka, hindi ko makita yung comment Yung paninira ng isang government official sa ibang bansa, APL ba yun? Paninira din. I don't think so. Is it intended to cause widespread fear? To intimidate the government? Yung mga ganun. Yun naman po yata. Tinatanong ni Mariles Flaminiano, retroactive ba yung batas? Wala pong nakalagay dun sa batas that it's retroactive and therefore it is not. Sabi ni Ma'am Yolanda Yoshida, sabi ni Secretary Lorenzana, may evidence sila na ang Makabayan Block ikasali ng NPA. I don't think those were his words. His words were, there is a connection or that they are providing aid to these people. Ngayon, yung problema is that sufficient to stand up in court? Or is it just sufficient for them to initiate an investigation? If ganito yun, if I believe if they had enough evidence that would stand up in court, they would have filed the case. They haven't Why wouldn't they do that? They're with government. This is the way to do it. And if they didn't do it, then I'd say that even they believe that there's not enough evidence, at least not enough to stand up in court. Ngayon, what most people forget is that pwede rin patanggalan sila ng accreditation sa COMELEC as party list. Kasi kailangan yung mga party list ay sumusunod sa batas. Ngayon, pag hindi sila sumusunod sa batas, then, di ba? Mawawala yung accreditation nila. I mean, hindi na sila pong pwedeng tumakbo for party list again. I-deactivate na yung party list na yon. O, yung mga chismoso dyan nagtatanong ng tatay ni River na sino, that's not fair, huwag kayong ganyan, huwag kayong chismoso. Hindi artista po yung batang yon, and that's a minor, huwag kayong ganyan. Sabi ni Sunny Doloroso, it's all drama and the court with all its pure intentions fell for it. Necropolitics is their long overused drama. Now it's all blown at MSM. Luckily for us, we have the likes of Trixie, Karambola, Tambayan team. They're all milking this. I suppose you're saying everybody else is milking it for what it's worth. Yeah. What's important for us is not to believe it. Diba? Huwag tayo magpapadala. Pero we can still show compassion, ha? May namatay dito, namatay yung bata, and wala namang kasalanan yung bata. Let's at least show compassion for the mother's grieving and for the grieving of the family, lalo na kung hindi naman rebelde ang mga pamilya. Okay? So, si Ma'am Annie, ang bait o, dinilit kagad yung comment. Kasi gusto ko rin sana that we are better than the other parlors. Sila talaga, yung mga tipong nag-apologize na yung tao, galit pa rin eh, di ba? So no, we're not going to be like them. Kaya kailangan, sabi ni June Adlawan, do you believe the Makabayan Block is not connected to the NPA? No, I didn't say that. What I'm saying is that the AFP must produce sufficient evidence to stand up in court. Okay. Do I think that they are connected? Yes, I think that, but thinking that and actually accusing them of something are two different things. Bakit? Kasi may libel laws eh. A malicious imputation of a crime, vice, or defect. Diba? So we also have to be careful about our own accusations. Huwag naman po tayong ganyan. Diba? I also don't want you to get into trouble, whether it's your Facebook account that get into trouble or that you are sued. So ingat-ingat din lang tayo when you're accusing somebody of a crime. Okay? However, if that person is a public figure, then we have a bigger way. So we're allowed to criticize mga government officials natin, di ba? Kaya pwedeng ating bahagi ng ating obligasyon na mag-criticize at puna sa ating mga government officials. Kasi, pasalo na rin mga yan. Diba? Ay sila. In fact, kahit private life nila, maaari natin i-criticize kasi they put themselves there. They put themselves in a position where they are in the public eye and therefore they're ripe for fair comment. Ngayon, nagiging libel na lang kapag ganyan public figure kapag may malis. Yung malis na yun, kailangan patunayan na alam natin grossly hindi totoo yan and yet you say it anyway. Sabi ni John Cañete, kapag naging batas ang anti-money laundering, pwede bang kasuhan yung kapatid ni Andy B? Batas na po, may anti-money laundering act tayo, kaya lang super daming blockage. Super daming, super bagal siya. Kailangan ma-predicate crime. Ibig sabihin, kailangan probable cause for another crime involving terrorism bago ka makapasok doon sa account ng isang tao. Or yung merong, not just terrorism, sorry, any other crime like corruption, kailangan may probable cause ka na doon. Since walang kaso, si former COMELEC, like, chair, Andy Bautista, hindi nabuksan kaagad yung account niya and he was able to drain it all. And even, in fact, yung bangko, yung First Luzon, ay hindi po nakasuhan. Okay? Next. di ko na ata makita na maiirita kayo sa hina ng sounds, which is totoo talaga dati. At nakakatuwa pag nagagalit kayo. Na nagsasabing mahina, napakaganda ng sound ng mic mo. Sabi ni Durfy Guy, uy, maraming salamat. Inayos yan. Sabi ni Ma'am Marilyn, ay, na-late daw siya. Di bale, pag ulit-ulit ko naman pinapanood ang live nyo. Ako, ang problema ko, pag naggaganito, kung bilis lumamig ng kape ko. Yun lang. Yun lang ang reklamo ko. Tinatanong ni Melie Bilar, yung mga party list na sinasabing connected sa mga NPAs, hindi ba pwedeng malaman o imbestigahan kung ang pera ng gobyerno ay sinusuporta nila ang NPA? Ay, hindi man natin sinasabing hindi pwedeng imbestigahan. Siyempre, pwedeng imbestigahan. Pero even to start an investigation, there has to be a reasonable ground, di ba? Hindi yung pwedeng binabantayan natin kahit walang dahilan in the hopes that they're going to slip up. Hindi din po ganon. That's why the amendment to the Anti-Wiretapping Act, sinasabi natin, kailangan pa rin ng warrant at ang nagbibigay po ng warrant nito ay ang Court of Appeals. Kailangan applyan pa rin. So, kailangan may ground, para umpisa ng investigasyon. At yung Anti-Wiretapping Act Amendment ay hindi lang para sa investigasyon, pero makaagap ng ebidensya. Para gano'n. Sabi ni Ma'am Raquel, I should get a thermos mug with it. Actually, meron po akong thermos, kaya lang hindi ko nagamit. Ngayon, hindi ko naisip. Sige, next time. Sabi ni Brian Echeverria, dapat imbestigahan yung mga salot na activists. Activism is not a crime, so bakit natin iimbestigahan? Be reasonable. I keep telling you guys, the judge will always apply reason first. Okay? Natanong ni Powell Dan, ano point niyo about kay Alan Peter if ever mapunta siya sa minority? Well, if Congressman Alan Peter Cayetano goes into the minority, then that is a clear indication that he is no longer with the party of the president. Okay? Think about that. Think about that for a while. Okay? Ulit If Congressman Alan Peter Cayetano becomes part of the minority, sorry. If Alan Peter Cayetano becomes part of the minority, then that is a clear indication hindi na siya kasama sa partido ng Pangulo. And therefore, that is also partly a declaration, That's partly a declaration that he has broken away. Okay? So, I wouldn't say that he's in the minority already, pero once that happens, we don't even need to comment on that anymore. Ngayon, remember, he has been very, very careful about not saying that he's against the president. Okay? So, maingat din si Congressman Cayetano about that. So, kahit tayo, maingat din, but be watchful. Be watchful about the people that we support. You have to be careful and listen to what they're saying and also what they're not saying. Diba? Sabi ni Clifford Abia, yung wiretapping po, hindi po ba yan invasion of privacy ng iniimbestigahan? Hindi po, not if there is a law providing for that. Ganito po yun. Ang sinasabi ng ating saligang batas, well, actually, if you look at the, ano yung privacy natin dyan, the privacy of communications. So, ibig sabihin yan, we are entitled to that right, but there are exceptions. And one of those exceptions is the protection of state interest. And when you protect the state's interest and the public interest by protecting the public from crimes that could cause extensive damage to them. Diba? To us. So, that is part of the Constitution makes exceptions for, the Constitution will make exceptions for when the state interest is involved or the public interest is involved. Okay? Pag sumama ang signal at medyo nagja-jam, wag na kayong magreklamo please para hindi na siya umalis. Hindi kasi nga, the reason na alis ako is because there's no point. in communicating. Guys, issue pa rin ba ang audio? My problem is that some will complain and others don't, which means that's not my problem. It's yours. Pero maganda yung comment na yun, yung pag, what if pumunta si Alan Peter sa minority. Looking at the other, do you have any other questions? Kasi if not, mag-aaral pa ako ng IRR, ng ating Anti-Terrorism Act. Sayang masaya ito. So, sabi ni Isani Doloroso, whatever happened to NBI? Andy Bautista, tul-tul lang sa US at may picture pa sa SOCMED, pero di nila mahanap. Nilumot na yung mga kaso ng misis niya. Once Andy Bautista is caught, malalaman natin sino ang mga nakaupo dyan sa Senado at Kongreso. At Kongreso na di dapat nakaupo. Kaya alam na bakit walang nakilos sa dalawang kapulungan na yan. Ultimo hybrid election, kawawa si Amy Marcos. Ang tahimik, ultimo admin-aligned senators and congressmen. Lahat konektado if mapapalakas lang yung money laundering law at sino dapat gumawa at tahimik about it. Kaya nga po dapat kilalanin natin at i-congratulate natin at pasalamatan natin ang Pangulo kasi sinertify niya as urgent yung pag-amenda sa Anti-Money Laundering Act. Okay? Eto, si Teddy O, tinatanong niya. Your audio is fine. By the way, would you wish to comment on the Remulla FB hoopla? I think I did already sa Karambola. Para sa akin, si Gov. John Vic naman, he's not really pro-Duterte pala. So, kung mag-a-align siya kay McCoy Dubs, hindi naman kawalan, di ba? But the thing is, si Gov. John Vic is still likable even if he's not very pro-administration. Yung brother niya, si Congressman, yan ang pro-administration. What do you think about it? Well, ang ano ko lang is that itong sina McCoy Dubs and all these other komentarista ng kabilang parlor or whatever parlor, while they are entitled to their freedom of speech, they are not exempt from the law on consequences. So, di ba? Ang lakas-lakas nilang mga akusa ng ng bayaran yung pala, di ba? May ganon. Ngayon, the excuses are actually laughable. One is saying that the Gov was hacked, which means that it was McCoy Dubs' party that did the hacking. The other statement is from the PR, which is saying, ano ba to? It was simply an error, and they apologized to McCoy Dubs. I'm not sure what to make of that one, but it's all damage control, but the damage has been done. Okay? Ano to? Sabi ni AR, ganito na lang. What if matodas na si Joma due to katandaan? Is it possible na mabura na yung NPA? I think the NPA is doing very well without him. And might not make a difference whether he's dead or alive. So I think some people are giving him too much importance in relation to the NPA, or too much importance in the sense of his actual influence, but importance in the sense that he has committed crimes or is continuing to commit crimes, then yeah, he's still a criminal. I mean, he's still a suspect. Sabi ni Ma'am Mariles Flamiano, was there a statement from John Vic Remulla? I haven't seen one. From the party involved, not from Gov. John Vic, but somebody saying that the account has been hacked. I'm not sure if it was Gov. John Vic himself or the administrator of his page. Sana po ay bigyang hindi ko nakita. Ayun. sana po daw bigyan ng ng pansin ng karambola yung Dengvaxia cases. When something happens, then we always will report it. Pagka wala naman kasing nangyayari, anong i-report namin? What will we comment? Ano, mema lang. Eh, di matutulad lang tayo kay Lenny. Wala namang bago. Wala namang dinagdag. May masabi lang. Huwag naman pong ganon. It's not going to do justice or not going to help the case if we keep doing that. Tinatanong kung batch ko si Kong Remulla sa law school. Hindi po. Ang mga superstar ng batch namin, si Ma'am Annette Goson, valedictorian namin yan. Siya yung pinaka-superstar yata ng batch namin. Ang mga bida sa amin, yung mga teachers. So, yung isang professor namin is Justice Leonen. Dating NEDA and DOE, Populatilia. Dating USEC ng Education under Noynoy was Albert Muyo at sino pa ba? Of course, professor din sa law school sa amin noon si Justice Hardelesa. Sino pa ba? Mga maraming activists. So of course, Raul Pangalangan naging publisher ng Inquirer. So yung mga yan, yung mga superstars namin were primarily the faculty. Of course, Melo Sereno was also teaching when I was in law school. Hindi ko siya naging professor. Eto, tinatanong ni Michael Alava, wala po bang magandang balita regarding sa apela ni Mang Marcos? Bakit naman kasi puro dilaw yung mga nailagay sa pamumuno ng hurado like si Justice Agiwa at ngayon si Justice Leonen? Actually, karamihan na ng mga nakaupo ay niluklok ni Presidente Duterte. And he will end his term with most of the court being his appointees. So, it's really the luck of the draw or the bad luck of the draw kung bakit si Justice Leonen. Niraffle po kasi yan at siya po sa kanya na iraffle yung kaso. So, we will report kasi nire-report naman din po sa karambola yung mga nilalabas ni Shadow Justice Jomar Canlas, di ba? Tinatanong ni Dijla, hindi po ba makakasuhan ang mga pasaway sa nakaraang administrasyon? I would like to think makakasuhan sila, but it also depends on the evidence. And in some cases, if anybody is going to complain, diba? Ano to? Sabi ni Don Dennis Villones Concepcion, sana po pansinin yung issue sa Laguna Lake, lalo na dahil need na po itong ma-dredging like PGMA wanted it before na ipakansila ni Noynoy. Ayun nga yung problema. Kinansila ni Noynoy but we still have to pay for it. So hindi ko alam kung ano yung status na kailangan talagang i-dredge ang Laguna Lake. Agree naman po ako dyan. Kasi nagbabaha na ang mga towns sa tabi nito. Di ba regularly, maulan lang ng konti, ang dami ng binabaha. So I agree with that one, but I understand that there are public works projects being done to address this. Sabi ni Teddy but there's a petition for Associate Justice Leonen to inhibit himself. I understand that it is Attorney Larry Gadon who wants to. I'm not sure if he filed an actual petition for it. Kasi in order to do that, you have to be a party to the case. So, yun. Sabi ni Nilas, and we're down to the last 3 questions, bakit po inaatake ng mga anti si Sir Mark Lopez? Because of his statements against si artista. Ayoko talagang banggitin yung pangalan. He said that the brand names should not take anymore si Miss Lisa Soberano as an image model kasi because of her links to terrorist organizations. Right? Did Mark Lopez commit libel? I don't think so. Because may basis yung mga sinasabi niya. Si Lisa Soberano had made statements, may basis. In other words, hindi siya utterly malicious because they're wrong or mistaken. Si Lisa Soberano had asked the youth to join Gabriela Youth. Ang sinasabi ng mga tao is lumitaw na nga yung video where Joma Sison himself identifies Gabriela as being one of the front organizations for the CPP. Gabriela, one of the Gabriela members has been killed in an encounter and she was an actual combatant. Tapos, meron pang, well, of course, so there are indications of a link. Now, is Gabriela a terrorist organization? Certainly not, because it has not yet been declared that. However, they have links nga to CPP, NPA, and NDF, and therefore, that's what Mark Lopez is saying. There are links to organizations that have been categorized, not in this country, as a terrorist organization, and that is the NPA. Okay? Mark Lopez doesn't say what those links are, so if you're going to conclude that these are deep links, then you're extrapolating. So, galit yung mga tao sa Twitter ngayon because of course, mahalaga pa sa kanila si Lisa Soberano dahil marami ang tangay. Because she has a lot of fans, there's a possibility na makuha nila yung fan base na yan. No, that's not Mikey. Hindi po umuwi si Mikey. That's not Belial, that's Oni. Okay. Last two questions. Ano po masasabi niyo sa closure ng gobyerno sa Alcader Elementary School at pinatay ng NPA ang leader tribe? Pero ang makakaliwang party list galit-galit sa pag-shutdown sa Alcader. Okay. First of all, nagkaroon ng opportunity na magtayo ng mga schools sa mga indigenous cultural communities kasi dati hindi umaabot ang DepEd doon. Okay? So, somebody filled that void. And that is the problem. Kapag ang gobyerno may kakulangan, papasukan yan ng either ng NGOs with good intentions or ng mga hindi naman good yung intentions. Okay. Nag-start kasi yung mga Alcadev schools, we all thought that they had good intentions. Hindi po sila magre-replace sa DepEd kasi yung curriculum nila hindi angkop doon sa curriculum ng DepEd. They teach, kumbaga, survival math, survival reading, yung enough. Pero, as of late, ang sinusumbong mismo ng mga miyembro ng mga cultural communities, ang sinasabi nila is, hindi po yan ang tinuturo. Tinuturoan kami magbaklas ng barel, maglinis ng barel, tinuturoan kami ng ideolohiya, ng komunista, and all that. Then this now extends beyond the law. So noon, nung ang tinuturo nila ay, yun nga, pagtatanim, basic reading, writing, wala pa silang illegal na ginagawa. Ngayon, ang sinasabi ng DepEd, pwede na kami dyan, sa area na yan. So, i-assess namin kayo, can you stay? So, nung in-assess ng DepEd, delikado nga, either, if they weren't teaching yung mga illegal things, they were also not teaching enough. So, tinanggalan sila ng accreditation. Take note ha, during the Noynoy Aquino administration, some of these Alcadev schools were either in the process of getting accreditation or had been accredited. Ngayon, tinanggal po yung dun sa iba. Okay? So, I think that kung babasihin natin sa assessment ng DepEd, then of course, talagang matatanggalan sila ng accreditation. Sabi ni Dijlay, kung ang pinaghandaan ng DepEd mga modules, bakit puro photocopies lang ang ginawa, hindi yung maayos yung module? Bakit? Bawal ang photocopies? I think photocopies are allowed. Bakit kayo nagagalit sa photocopies? Do you want them to be individually printed? Okay, last question. Sabi ni Oseng yan, Paula, I think the red tag orgs should issue statements by denouncing the NPA. That's one way, but the same way that we have the freedom of speech. Remember that we have freedom of speech. We have also the freedom to not speak. Hindi rin tayo pwedeng pilitin na magsalita. Ngayon, kung ayaw po magsalita ng ibang mga organisasyon, diba? We can't force them either. Kung para sa kanila, safe pa rin sila, di sila makakasuhan, di sila talaga magsasalita. Sabi ni Ma'am Rochelle sa Avedra, speaking of Alcadev, dinalaw yan ni Angel Locsin kasama mga madre sa Diatago, Lianga, Surigao del Sur. Okay, that's certainly interesting. Okay? Pero, does that mean that Angel committed a crime? Not necessarily. Remember what we were saying about guilt by association? Si Angel is not guilty simply because she associates herself with nice people around her, with the NPA. She has to have either be part of a conspiracy or part of that organization in committing the criminal acts in order for her to be a criminal. Okay? Last, sabi ni Jamie Moore, bakit sinadya ng Dilawan na hindi abutin ng DepEd ang mga lugar? Sinadya ang mga lugar na may NPA schools para may rason na magpatayo ng kaanib nilang NPA ng schools. I don't think sinasadya yun. I think that at the time, they did not have the resources. Ang tingin ko is that, kasi ako I would like to think first well of the people, lalo-lalo na of our educators. So, in that case, I think they really did not have the capability to do that. Okay? So, maraming salamat sa pagsubaybay sa ating live today. Don't forget to like and share ha, Sir John, Sir Ma'am Annie. Wag mong kakalimutan mag-like and share. At saka, alam nyo, may problema pala ang Luminous ngayon. Tinothrottle yung ating mga followers. Yung iba, hindi po nakikita sa newsfeed ang Luminous. Tapos yung iba, hindi makafollow. So, please check kung nakafollow pa rin kayo sa Luminous. And if not, click follow and then click see first. Dun sa nagsasabing maganda yung coffee mug ko, maraming salamat kasi this was courtesy of the 51st engineers. So, maraming salamat. Sa tayo? Sa Sambuanga tayo. So, ulitin ko po ha. For those instances, when there is an opportunity for us to be kind, let's just take it. Diba? And let's not diminish the pain of other people. But, at the same time, we should not also allow other people to dictate on our own actions. So, why am I saying this? When we make mistakes, we will admit those errors. And if other people make mistakes and they admit their errors, huwag na natin po silang bigyan ng hard time about it. Because if, lalo na pag taga-kabilang parlor at umamin sila, that's a step in the right direction. Diba? And for those naman na bumabati ko sa atin, simple lang yan 91% tayo, di ba? And we have this incredible capacity to do good. So, what we're doing here at Luminous is providing as much information as we can so that we have better capacity, not just better capacity, but we will see the areas where we can actually help. Di ba? Huwag natin din pong kakalimutan, tulungan si Glenn Chong, #hybrid elections po tayo. Tulungan din po natin si Senator Amy Marcos dito sa pagpasa ng batas for hybrid elections. Bulabugin po natin, kuyugin natin ng emails, legal lang po, ang office ni Congressman Ferrer na siyang sa ngayon ang committee head ng Congressional Committee on Electoral Reform. So, hindi po kami magtitigil sa paghihikayat ng pagbabago sa ating electoral system, hybrid elections. No? But we also will not stop in discussing yung mga ganitong issues na to act within reason, to give people their due. If meron tayong mga kahinaan at meron tayong mga kasalanan sa lipunan, pinagbabayaran po natin yun. And we take every opportunity to do what good we can do. Diba? Sa ngayon, maraming salamat. Mag-aaral na po tayo tungkol sa IRR ng anti-terrorism law and we'll be posting a lot of these impressions on Luminous. Antabayanan po natin. Everybody have a happy Sunday. Have a good day, everybody, and I hope your pets are healthy and happy and your family is to nauna pa yung pets. Harry and Yoshi, say hi, and all the cats. Have a good day.